Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our first Advocacy Cafecito. It's been a long time since we've seen you all, and I want you to know I am Regina Platt, your local racial justice coordinator for YWCA Northeast Kansas. We are happy to have with us today YWCA's board secretary and advocacy committee member, Megan Williams, to host today's talk on reproductive rights. For more than 50 years, YWCA has supported the reproductive freedom of all people to make fundamental decisions about whether and when to have children. We are striving to create a world in which all women, especially women of color, are free from racism and sexism and can thrive. We refuse to sit on the sideline during this historical movement, which is why we are so glad to have Megan and Dr. Alsaden, I don't want to mess up, right? Medical Director of Planned Parenthood Great Plains with us in the Cafecito today to educate, engage, and empower members of the YWCA movement. Welcome, Megan and Dr. Alsaden.
Thanks, Regina, and thank you, Dr. Alsaden. We can't thank you enough for your generosity of time today and information. As Regina mentioned, the YWCA has long advocated for the health and safety of women and girls. We continue to stand in support of reproductive freedom and are committed to working for the protection of reproductive rights. Our goal with this conversation is to destigmatize abortion with factual information. Can you give us a little bit of a background on what you do?
Hi, everyone. I'm Iman Alsaden. I am the medical director of Planned Parenthood Great Plains, which covers Western Missouri, Kansas, of course, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. I am an abortion provider. I primarily work in Kansas, but do travel to the other clinics to provide abortion care when that was legal, sadly. And yeah, I'm a transplant. I moved to the Kansas City area from Chicago, Illinois in January of 2021, and I'm happy to be here and happy to talk to you guys.
Awesome. We couldn't be happier as well. Can you give us, from your professional perspective and opinion, why is reproductive health so important for women?
So reproductive health is important for everyone. Especially women, but just everyone across the board. Reproductive health touches everyone's lives on all of Earth throughout their lifetime. Some people just don't realize that it's relevant to them as well. When you give someone the reproductive freedom to parent or not parent, or take care of the families that they already have, you're allowing people to live the lives that they are envisioning for themselves, and that is or should be part of someone's basic fundamental human rights. And so really, in my opinion, reproductive health is a key human rights issue. We cannot be forcing people to do things with their bodies that they do or that they do not want to do. And this also ties into something that's been a very hot topic throughout the country lately, besides the abortion issue, is maternal morbidity and mortality. The maternal mortality rate is extremely high for Black women compared to white women. And abortion is involved in that. When you force people to carry pregnancies that aren't safe for them or that they do not want to carry, you will see an increase in the maternal mortality rate in this country. So these things are all intrinsically linked to each other. Social policies are also linked to abortion, because these anti-abortion and anti-human laws will disproportionately affect people that are of low income, Black and brown people, people that don't necessarily identify as cis women, things like that. These are all laws that will affect people disproportionately that are not cis, white, heterosexual people.
So, Dr. Iman, so the legislation has been dubbed No Right to Abortion Amendment, also value them both. Do you see this as a way to value both women and children?
No, definitely not. So this goes back to a lot of things, but primarily when you are controlling people to the point where they cannot access a piece of healthcare or access things that they need for their families, you're not valuing anyone. Part of valuing someone is listening to them about what they need for their lives and their families, and not allowing people to have access to not allowing people to have access to comprehensive reproductive health care really makes it implausible that you're valuing anyone. To value something or value someone's life or opinions is to let people make decisions about their own lives and listen to what they're saying they need. It's not to make decisions for them and make laws that don't allow them to access their basic human rights. Mm-hmm. I'm in a position right now where the government and religion are telling me what I can and can't do as a physician. Mm-hmm. This is a very blurry, dangerous line to get involved in. I do think that there could be implications in other areas of healthcare for what is happening right now, where there is basically this combination of church and state that is limiting medical practice throughout the country and thus the care that patients can access. These laws about like listening to women, giving people what they need, women wouldn't choose abortion if they had other options, that is a false narrative. First of all, no one's listening to women, because who listens to women? The abortion clinics that see patients when they come needing an abortion. Like, we're not listening to them and being like, no, you can't have an abortion. We're listening to what they need. We trust them. There's this entire trust Black women narrative. Like, who's trusting Black women? It's the people that are listening to what they need to do in their own lives. And furthermore, the concept that people show up at our clinic and haven't thought about what they're doing to an intense degree is completely false. They have considered all the other options, by and large, most of the time. They have thought long and hard about this decision, and they have overcome multiple obstacles that have been put in place by lawmakers that, quite frankly, they didn't really choose to elect. And that goes back to like voter suppression and gerrymandering. I could literally go on, but they have thought about it. Like, let me assure each and every one of you, like, these people have had to go through so much, climb so many hurdles because of anti-abortion laws, that they have thought about it. There are very few people that come to the abortion clinic and change their minds. And when people come to the abortion clinic and change their minds, it's not because they've made a flippant decision to come to the abortion clinic. These are people that are having internal conflict. That's their business, and it is their right to either have an abortion or not. And to take away that right is very, very dangerous from a lot of perspectives, right? Like, this isn't just about abortion. This whole argument was made on a privacy issue. And so there are a lot of issues in our society that are privacy issues and have been decided by Supreme Court cases that are related to privacy issues. And I think that it's not, I don't want to be alarmist, but it's not unreasonable to think that these other rights could also be in jeopardy from this. I mean, this is a clear, what SB 8 did, what they did, what SB 1503 did in Oklahoma, what would happen if the value them both ballot initiative passed, is that we would see a situation where we had a constitutional right and it was taken away both by the federal government and the state government. And that's scary, right? You think of constitutional rights like, oh, these are my rights. Like, we social justice leaders fought for these things and struggled And, you know, these things are written in stone, basically. But guess what? This Supreme Court of the United States has said, no, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't care about the Constitution. When you have a Supreme Court that just has no regard for constitutional precedent, you're in a very dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the situation we're in now. I kind of rambled about like all kinds of things, but it's all connected. That's something that I think is a really important point to understand.
If this legislation is approved, what do you see the impact will be to women's health, in particular women of color?
Yeah, I think we all saw in Kansas what would happen if the ballot initiative passed and our state constitutional protection was removed from the Kansas state constitution for abortion. The Kansas legislators made that very clear to us in their term, in their legislative session this year, 2022, when they introduced, I believe it was a total abortion ban. I don't know the bill number off the top of my head, but I received many emails about it, and that was something that was introduced by our legislators this year. So if you think that that's not going to happen, if people have told you that it's not to completely ban abortion in Kansas, it's just to make it not an abortion tourism state, that's completely not true. And you can look at our legislative session that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we will see this in 2023. Kansas will become a place where you do not have basic human rights. It will become a place where the government is interfering with your life in a way that is not acceptable. And you will be in a state where you were born with more rights than you have now.
That's a terrifying thought. Thank you for that. Is there anything else that you want to add, or Allison, Regina, any other questions before we call to action?
One of the things I continue to look at is what will be the aftermath of this when it comes to our criminal justice system. What will be the aftermath when it comes to the number of women being incarcerated and other children's being divided from their families? What will come when we look at poverty? So we're talking about our aftermath of them choosing to pass this bill. And what will be the effects on communities who are already having health disparities, communities who are already living in poverty, communities who are already operating in brokenness. And I think about that, right? Yeah. And so how do you see this? Because as a Black woman, I see how already historically the bodies of Black women have been experimented on without choice. And how recently our Black young women's bodies and brown, our BIPOC communities' bodies were being experimented on, our young females, right? And had no power to speak up, and how continuously we're choosing to say it's okay for this cycle to continue, but we can experiment with you in our way, but don't you make a choice to do anything that you feel would be best for you.
There's a lot of things to say about all the things you just said, and thank you for bringing all that up. And I think you know this, but I'll just say it out loud so that everyone can hear it. This is obviously, anti-abortion laws are racist, white supremacist laws, okay? Systems of oppression in the United States have always been rooted in white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, prison industrial complex, like you mentioned, healthcare industrial complex, right? Like, only rich white people can get the best care in this country because that's all rooted in capitalism. This has all been to benefit, cisgendered, white, rich people. White supremacy aims to control, as you know, the bodily autonomy of Black and Brown people. And the way that that works is if you can control the bodily autonomy of Black and Brown people, then you can ensure that people will remain in cycles of poverty, and that you will keep a small portion of rich white people in charge, and they're being held up by the labor, time, and sacrifices and bodies of everyone else in our society. I think it's interesting, and I always think about this, that the same people that want there to be no abortion also want there to be less taxes. If we lived in a truly pro-human society, we would already be paying more taxes, and our systems of support for children and families would be much, much better, much more easily accessible. I'm thinking our education system, I'm thinking about WIC, I'm thinking about child support, welfare, everything. And that's why I say this is all tied all the time. I mean, you can really extrapolate upon this to everything, which you did when you were just talking about it. And in terms of incarceration and criminalization of Black and Brown people, you are absolutely 100% right. The way to these vigilante enforcement laws are not like, I'm speaking of SB 8 in Texas, SB 1503 in Oklahoma. These are not laws that can be enforced in an efficient and large scale way. But if you criminalize abortion and you criminalize self-managed abortion, that is something that you really would wield control over people and their bodies and their lives. And this is not like the future, the dystopian future, like people getting criminalized for abortion or even miscarriage. Like, this is now. There is a woman named Brittany Pula in Oklahoma who is in prison. She was convicted of manslaughter for having an intrauterine fetal demise at 17 weeks, and also admitting that she was using drugs in the hospital. And it's not like she's just arrested right now and waiting trial. She has been convicted. Okay. So this is happening. And the Lizelle case in Texas, it's like, yeah, everyone was able to call that jail in Texas and get her out. But what about when that happens on a much larger scale? We just don't have the resources to continue to fight this on this like micro scale. So these cases are examples of how this is going to continue to happen, especially as more abortion restrictions get passed in certain places. Yeah, more control will be exerted over pregnant people and their bodies. And yeah, it's very scary, and it's not the future, it's now. And I'm not trying to be alarmist, but I do think that people should be alarmed. Like, your basic human rights are at stake. Everyone should be able to control their own lives and their own bodies, and no one should be incarcerated for exercising their basic human rights. I mean, that is unreasonable and cruel. These laws are cruel. They are designed to keep people down, disproportionately affect people of low income, communities of color. And, we're going to see that in terms of imprisonment rates, criminalization of abortion care too, I believe. And not to be dystopian, super dystopian future, but if we have a Republican president and a Republican Congress, there is in my opinion, a very good chance. And I think a lot of like legally minded people agree. I'm just legally minded in the sense that I've watched a lot of Law and Order SVU and The Good Wife and stuff. But there is a good chance that we will be facing a federal abortion ban.
So when you think about statistics, right, we know that we need that data to be out there and to be seen. What do you think about the testimonies during this time, how powerful they would be or not powerful, right? But Regina is seen powerful. So the movement of sharing and letting people know, right? This is not something that I, by chance, the wind flew and these decisions are being made, but these are purposeful decisions. What do you speak to that as we speak to the community and talk to them about the power of this move together?
Just a clarifying question. Do you mean the personal stories of patients?
Patients who are willing. We're not encouraging
Yes,
that everyone share,
yes.
but
Okay.
those
Yeah.
patients or family members who have experienced things happening, community members who have experienced, what do you say to them speaking up during this season?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of media, and the person that they want to talk to more than me is a patient, always. Those are the most powerful stories because those are the people that people identify with, and they see their sister or even their child or their friend from down the street in those people. You know, me saying something like all these different kinds of people access abortion is totally different and much less impactful than people actually seeing the people that are accessing abortion and hearing their stories. Those are always the most powerful stories. And they really shed light on the human aspect of all of this. Like, it's easy to think about like, oh, X number of people access abortion a year, but actually seeing some of those faces and hearing what those people have to say and listening to them, right? That's another key. Like, we have to listen to people, which is something that our government just lacks the ability to do for some reason. You know, that is definitely the most powerful form of communication that we have with people outside the movement.
Thank you. Allison has a question, I believe, in the chat. From your medical perspective, what can people who would be affected by these bans be doing to take care of themselves right now in terms of physical and mental health?
That's a good question. I feel like I can't say much because I'm so bad at taking care of myself in this terrible time. I don't know. I really think like people don't realize the severity of what's going on. And abortion is often an issue that's not really thought about or addressed in someone's life until it directly affects them. And that's kind of an issue with abortion, right? Like, people are still saying, I don't think Roe v. Wade's going to be overturned. They can't do that. That's not going to happen. It's like, literally, there is a paper, an 80-something page paper on the internet that says that it is going to. Like, people just don't believe that all these bad things are going to happen. And so I do think that educating oneself on the current situation in the world and in our state where we live is really important to kind of keep an eye on what kind of restrictions are being placed on you as a human person. But yeah, like I can't really comment on like how to like do like good self-care mentally, because I mean, I am very burned out. My entire staff is burned out. We are just working as hard as we possibly can to deliver healthcare to the largest amount of people that we can in the safest way that we can. And so admittedly, I have not been great at self-care over these past few months, almost a year now, you know.
So my last thing I would ask, and I'll pass back to Megan real fast. Oh, I was going to say something, but Allison says, are you seeing more people come through your clinics for any type of care?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing more people come for all kinds of reproductive health care. One thing that we do see a lot of, and I think this kind of speaks to how these laws affect people, is, you know, some people feel like it's not safe to get trans care in their communities now with all these anti-trans bills. And so, you know, we see a lot of those people via telehealth if it's possible for them. Or sometimes people drive a long distance to get gender affirming care from us because, you know, people don't understand what the laws usually mean. So I went through a period of time where I was seeing a lot of patients in Kansas that had already believed that they couldn't get an abortion really anywhere else in the area, even though that wasn't true. These laws are confusing on purpose. People are confused by them. People are coming to us a lot, for contraception as well, not pregnant, just wanting to prevent pregnancy, or manage their periods. There's all kinds of different reasons for contraception, but there are many people who think that these anti-abortion laws are also linked to contraception, right? That's the link that the abortion as contraception lends itself to, right? Like, oh, if abortion is legal, then contraception must be legal too. I've seen many patients from Texas who are like, can you send birth control to my pharmacy in Texas? There's just all this confusion, and that's on purpose to make people think that their rights are even more truncated than they actually are. But in terms of, we see people come from all over for all different types of care, because quite frankly, like, we're doing stuff that has somehow become controversial that's very normal, right? Like STD testing, giving the HPV vaccine. It's like, if you told me there was a vaccine to prevent cancer, I would be pushing my way to the front of the line to get that. Of course, the narrative of that has become like, if you give people the HPV vaccine, they will become promiscuous. Like, there's no evidence for that, but that's how all vaccines have now become controversial, and the HPV vaccine has become controversial for that reason. We're giving people birth control. That has also somehow become a topic of discussion, which is crazy. Abortions, very normal part of very many people's lives. Totally controversial. And then gender affirming care. I think that's something that we're going to kind of see next here, is that people are going to go after people that are accessing gender affirming care. First, children, because of parental consent. And then I do think you'll see it in adults as well.
Thank you, Dr. Iman. That was very profound and helpful. Regina, did you have one more question?
Well, the question was, when we say the words out of our mouths, land of the free, home of the brave.
That's a joke.
Expound on that a little bit. Land of the free, when we talk
Okay.
about reproductive health, reproductive rights, reproductive justice.
Okay,
hearing the
so
voices of our
freedom
people.
is an illusion, in my opinion, because when you allow intense gerrymandering and extreme voter suppression, there is no way that you are in what we refer to as a democracy, because not everyone can vote and express their rights. And in places where people can vote, the districts have been drawn in a way that guarantees that no change will ever be able to be made in that area, for that congressional seat or state Senate seat or whatever. So it's difficult to see that, it's difficult to hear that we're like land of the free, right? If you don't allow all the people in this country the same rights to vote as other people. Our society, it's impossible to wrap my mind around how Democrats have won, I think, most of the elections by the popular vote, and then have lost because of electoral college. I mean, that is how can that be a democracy? Like, it just doesn't make sense. I think the electoral college is an anti-democratic, obviously, institution. And we saw what happened in Georgia with the special election. Stacey Abrams spent years fighting voter suppression in Georgia, and guess what? It worked. People were able to register to vote, people were able to vote, and we have 2 Democratic Senate seats in Georgia, which is like the deep South. So I think if you were to see more fights like that and more focus on, it's kind of interesting because it's a very similar issue to reproductive justice, right? It's not like, is there voting? It's like, can people access voting? And reproductive justice has, the framework, part of that framework is, it doesn't matter if Roe is legal. There's already people in this country that are living in a post-Roe world, and there were before this. because access is so limited to abortion. So there's all these issues of like, yeah, things are legal, but like, can people actually access them? That's a different story. And I think that's what a lot of people living in, especially more liberal areas in the areas that we live in, don't realize. It's like, oh, well, that's legal so that everyone can get it. And it's like, no, that's not reality. That's not how the world works. And it's easy to think that. I mean, I lived in Chicago. It's easy to think that when you live in a place like Chicago, which has obviously its own slew of enormous problems. But you're living, it's a completely different world. And so it's easy to believe like that the rest of the world is like that because that's what you see every day. That's your world. But yeah, I don't know how freedom can exist in a place where there are people that are lesser than that will never be allowed to vote, like felons. Like, how can you have gone through the prison system and be rehabilitated and you still don't have the right to vote? I mean, that's really, who thought of that? I mean, that's really crazy. Like, you're admitting that you don't believe in your own prison system, which makes sense because it's stupid, but like, how can that be? And then all these like all these pro voter suppression laws that Republicans pass, you're looking at a situation where there are people being blatantly white supremacist and racist, and nobody cares anymore. Like, everyone's saying crazy shit all the time, over and over again. And it's like, nobody's even trying to hide that they're like a racist anymore, in my opinion. Like, I feel like when I was growing up, it was like, people were, I'm 34. So I feel like when I was growing up, people were like, you know, like everyone was racist still, because that's like how everyone is. But like, people are trying to hide it more, like in the government. And now it's like this Trump era of just like this extremism, and it really doesn't matter what you say. Whoever talks louder is right. Lies are abound. Science doesn't matter. Listening to the people that elected you or the rest of the people in the country doesn't matter. It's just about we're living in a world where the agenda of very few people, the clear minority, is getting advanced in a way that is like rapid. And it's just a really dangerous space for people like me, I'm a queer brown abortion provider, you know, like like it's just a dangerous world. You know, I like worry about my safety when I like go to the gas station. Like, why should anyone live in a world like that? Or why should anyone have to live in a world like that? And it's because there's like this just like extreme white nationalism is taking over our society. And that comes with a lot of things that are really unsafe for many, many people.
What can we do to help besides voting no on August 2nd?
Honestly, I think that's the most important thing. But talking to people about abortion and this in a way that makes it clear that like there shouldn't be any government interference within our bodies and our lives is, I think, something that really resonates with people in Kansas and resonates with people throughout the country when you talk to them. Yeah, I think a good way to kind of approach this conversation is that like there are people that are being forced to carry pregnancies to term and go through all of the risks of pregnancy that they don't want to do because of the religious beliefs and moral beliefs of very few people that often don't resemble them or represent them at all. It is a privacy issue, right? Maybe the legal framework of how Roe was decided is not the best and most stable as we're seeing now, but this is a privacy issue. I mean, it really is about like, why would anyone outside of anyone else's life like think that they know better than that person? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, people should be able to make decisions about their own bodies. That's like one of the basic tenets of democracy.
Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say thank you and your team for tirelessly advocating for women and reproductive health. On behalf of the Advocacy Committee and the board and our organization and Kansas, really appreciate you being here today. Anything else before we wrap up from Regina or Allison? Just also make sure to vote no on August 2nd, HCR 5019, SCR 1613, the No Right to Abortion Amendment. Deadline to register is July 12th. Make sure yourself and your friends are all registered to vote.
Thank you both so much. Vote no. Vote no. Thank you.
Thank you guys.